MysteryWire.com, home of the unusual and unknown. From Area 51 to the paranormal, it's your source to the most vetted UFO stories and special investigations in the world. Take a journey into the universe of MysteryWire.com.
Let's start this way. You know, the public mostly knows you for your interest in UFOs, but you've actually, for most of your adult life, been interested in the two big questions. Are we alone?
Yeah.
And what happens after we die?
Right. Those are the two holy grails. Those are the biggest questions there are. Yeah.
Your interest in consciousness, survival of consciousness after death, though, actually precedes you jumping into the deep end of the pool on UFOs, doesn't it?
Well, if you don't count things that happened to my family,
Right.
you know, when I was a little kid, I think the Are We Alone came first when I was a kid because of events that happened to my grandparents, to my mother and my grandparents, and then maybe even to me when I was a kid. And then I committed when I was about 12 years old to really get into this someday. When I grew up, and if I had money, and trying to figure a way how to make money in order to commune with other people, maybe create some kind of groups or whatever to help me explore. And so it was very pre-engineered that I had done the engineering on the effort to try to go do these kinds of things, you know, while trying to make a living and support a family and all that. So
The UFO experience.
yeah,
I know there's a little bit of information about that has come out, about your grandparents.
right.
Can you tell us your involvement, though, why you think it involved you as well?
Well, I was probably 10 years old when my mother was telling me the story of my grandparents' incident and their encounter. And that was back in 1947, about May of 1947, when they had their encounter. And I was about 3 years old at the time, and I wasn't with them. And that night was a night that they didn't want to talk about, especially my grandfather. My grandmother would barely talk about it, but all the information really I got was from my mom. And, and so that was a super close encounter that they had.
Was it just a sighting, or was there something else to it?
Don't know. You know, I've done a lot of research in the ET UFO area, and if I were looking at this objectively as a third-party situation, I would say they were good candidates for being abducted that night. Apparently, they were on the side of the road for a long time in order for my grandfather to recoup himself. They thought they were going to die, and because of the UFO coming in filled up the entire windshield of the car, and so it came into their view so dramatically, and they expected a crash was going to happen, and then it just shot off. And so, you know, I kind of think that they got home a lot later than they ever expected to get home, back down from this mountain highway. And so I think that's possible, you know, that may have had an encounter.
1947 is a pretty momentous year.
It was about 2 months before Roswell. Yeah. And I think Ken Arnold was in there about the same time frame.
So whatever their experience was, they didn't want to talk about it. That was something that bothered them for a long time.
No, they didn't, especially my grandfather. He didn't want to talk about it, and because I tried a couple times, and my grandmother would just barely say anything about it. So it shook them up and stayed with them the rest of their lives.
But your mom got enough information out of it to piece this story together.
Yeah. And I think my father talked to my grandfather about it because my father began to be interested in the topic and buy books on it. Well, there weren't many of decent books. Just maybe, you know, he had maybe 3 or 4, and so he wasn't caught up in just the interest as a family member hearing about this, you know, from his in-laws, and but he never. It was my mother that told me the story, not my dad, about what happened to the in-laws.
You had other experiences as a youngster that sort of clued you in that something was going on. You've shared those with me privately. I don't know if you want to talk about them publicly or not.
Well, it's just that I had a series of repeated dreams that didn't make any sense, when I was probably 7, 8 years old or so. And it was always the same stupid dreams, same thing, and had no point to them. And I couldn't connect the dream to anything. I couldn't connect it to comic books. And we didn't have television. And when I was 7 or 8 years old, you know, that would have been around 52. I would have been 8. And as you know, television came in 53 or 4 in that time frame.
53 here.
And so, and it wasn't in the movies, and it was the same stupid dream. I'm in bed, laying on my side, and I'm in a twin bed that's up against the wall, the corner of a small bedroom, and I'm laying there, and there are 3 somethings in some kind of monk clothing. Couldn't see any appendages, could see that there were some kind of arms, but I couldn't see faces, couldn't see hands or anything like that, if in fact they were people, and they were about eye level as I'm laying in bed. So they're pretty short. And they were there. I wasn't afraid. And these dreams were the same dream about 6, maybe half a dozen times, plus or minus. And so through all the research again that I've done for a lot of years with abductees, I thought, well, somebody would tell me this story. I would want to regress this person and see if they were a candidate, you know, had been abducted or something. I don't know. So I chalked it up to dreams, and I still think that that's as good an answer as whether or not I had something more, but I'll accept a very peculiar set of dreams as the explanation today.
We fast forward to about 1980. Something happens in your family that galvanizes your attention to want to know more about the other side, whether we go on.
Yeah. Well, actually, the first impact for that was before that.
Oh.
For me. It was when I was 18, and my father was killed in a private plane crash, a plane that belonged to a friend of his, and so that happened when in my first semester of school, of college, and that was very dramatic for me. We never had a funeral, so there was no closure there. My mother didn't want that, and and there was the plane exploded. It hit something on the ground. It hit a structure on the ground, and so there's a fire and everything, and there wasn't, you know, probably much left, and so it took me 10 years to stop having dreams about him, and that's a whole decade before I could finally stop having all different kinds of dreams. And they weren't I would classify them as paranormal dreams. It was just an event where now you have someone very close to you that passed over, and so the seed is planted, right? The seed is planted as the curiosity with, what about survival? Is there any opportunity for that whatsoever? I mean, you know that this is blasphemy. And for a lot of religions and certain precepts for people who already are committed to their own beliefs, because either their parents were, whole family was, and that's what they're taught, or whatever it might be, they say, no, there is no survival at all. This is it. This is the end. And then you have agnostics. So you have people who don't know, and that's fair. So it's not as though everybody in the world buys off on any of this. You know, people need proof, and I really appreciate that, because I'm a doubting Thomas. I have to have a lot of white crows on my pile, and then I have to have multiple piles of white crows, right? Because I really want to know, and so I've gotten into these fields fairly deeply, especially in the ET UFO field, and more deeply than I have in the survival field, you know. But you're right, back in about 1980, my wife and I, we lost our son later, and I had already been investigating, fortunately, this topic, and it helped me in his death and in being able to cope with our son's death later on.
The thought that he goes on in some fashion.
Yeah, that there was hope that his consciousness, some part of him survived, and that was very comforting to me. I had little visitations with maybe 3 mediums, and I remember one of them was George Anderson, very nice fellow, and he was helpful. And my wife also saw him as well. We asked him to come to Las Vegas, and he did, and that helped us a great deal with that tragedy.
You're trying to, and this is an emotional atom bomb for you and your wife, right?
Oh yeah, as it would for any families, sure, yeah.
You use the mediums to try to communicate. You want to see if you can communicate.
We weren't that sophisticated. Basically, it was, can you express to us some things as to what's coming across to you, to the medium, that we haven't told you and you wouldn't probably know? Can you kind of establish proof that there is an existence there on the other side? And then I think as close as we got to any kind of messaging, beyond establishing that he was in some sort of communication, was, is he well? Is he okay? And we didn't get it to very sophisticated as to, would you tell us a little bit as to what the other side is all about? Just a little bit, a teeny little bit of anything, because to me, that is, once you've gotten past trying to establish, is there anything to the other side at all? Is it real? Is it partially real? Is there one white crow there that you can't explain? Well, then you start to say, okay, if it might be real, it's really important to you as to what am I going into? What is it all about? What am I going to turn into, and what am I going to be able to do? And is it going to be miserable and misery, or is it going to be something that has elation to it and a lot of gratification? You feel like you have worth.
So you have these 3 mediums. You give it a try. You don't really get anything solid from them, or you get a little bit hints that it might be real.
Well, frankly, I think 2 of the 3, one especially was very dubious. I mean, it was bizarre. So I chalk him up. Another lady, this black lady, I think she was probably legitimate. Again, I was so green into this. I didn't know what to ask, what to say, but I think I recall that she had said some things that were really intriguing. And then George. So it's not like I did any real research at all, and then our grandson passed, and he died, and so again, this field was comforting, again, to embrace the possibility that there is going to be some kind of survival, and it really, really helps coping with these kinds of tragedies, so.
It's a huge question. Everyone should be involved. Nobody gets out of here alive. It'd be nice to know that you go on. That's always been the province of religion. They tell us if you're good, you go on, you go here, you go there. But you're looking for something more substantial. And, people do tend to put that thing in the side of their head and not think about it because they don't want to contemplate death.
Yeah. Well, we have all kinds of horror movies about zombies and about, it's so entertainment has taken and made it scary, for children and even adults. And I'm not saying there aren't aspects. There are. I never, with the UFO topic and ET topic, I never felt threatened. I know others really have, and people that associated with our work had times that they had to struggle with what they had encountered. And you know these people too. And so, but I personally never felt that way. I felt a different kind of connection. And so, like with the Skinwalker Ranch, I felt like I was a caretaker. I was a facilitating, hosting people, to certain kinds of folks to come to the property, government people to come to the property, and scientists to come there and do things. But I was a facilitator is all. And never threatened. I had a great night's sleep every single time, and some other people did too, you know. There's an aspect though to this survival work. It's a bit different. And there's a piece of it that, and if people bother to read the literature, if you bother to go into the books and really try to find quality material, and it's out there by the hundreds of books, by quality authors, you'll come across publications that after a while you'll start to get a consensus because of multiple sources coming at you, and you'll start to get a consensus of a feeling of things. And so it does have this aspect of things to be concerned about. And you know, I've told you that since we formed this institute in June, all of a sudden we had people around us that started having things happen, and not all of it was rosy. Okay, so I mean, this is family members, myself, my staff, and none of this we expected. None of it, we hadn't asked for anything, positioned anything, decided to do any of this kind of research. Our whole intention to begin with was simply trying to get ourselves up to speed in the literature. Excuse me. After being away from this for so many years, focusing on a space world, right? That's been mainly what I've been doing. Except for the Skinwalker Ranch thing for 20 years, is the space world has been huge in my life to pursue. The legitimate parochial kind of, you know, using fire engines, rockets to get you there. So we didn't expect anything like this to happen. And so this is a different, this Holy Grail is different than the second Holy Grail. If the second one being the ET is a little bit lower, and this first one, is there any part of your consciousness that survives your bodily death? That's a big deal. That's a huge story. That's gigantic.
Like I said, people don't want to think about it or talk about it in general,
Yeah.
because they don't want to think about dying or
That's right.
contemplate that.
Yeah, who does?
No getting around
know.
it. But if the project that we're about to discuss, if it is successful, if you could establish contact, if you could
Yeah.
prove it, it could be a great benefit to everyone. I mean,
Well, you have to be, you know, a little careful about what you wish for. So, on the face of it, communication sounds great. And that, by the way, that has been tried forever, ever since the Oracle of Delphi. I mean, you can go back thousands of years and that's been attempted. So it's not now these, you know, the last 100 years through electronics and using some kind of electrical apparatus to try to have some kind of communications. And you know, communication can be at all different kinds of levels. There might be a communication that just causes you an awareness that there is something else there that is acting upon something. So you're not getting any kind of message other than I'm acting upon something. You know, it might just be a, you know, that, as they say, I'm not a robot type of thing. And heard that. So
We'll divert a little bit, then we'll come back to the BICS and the consciousness mission. So you're diving into consciousness. You're reaching out to try to figure out if communication is possible, or is there somebody on the other side?
Right.
And then you dive into UFOs in a big way for a number of years. I know in 1989 we produced a series that was our first contact. After that aired, and the whole Lazar story came out.
right.
Was that a trigger point for you, or were you already diving into UFOs with the same vigor and enthusiasm?
I had committed myself before that to investigate, and one of the things I started off was reading, trying to get myself up to speed. I read a book a week for a year, just so I could talk the talk and understand if people were talking about cases in Colombia or in Argentina or in California or wherever. I knew the basics about a whole lot of observations, encounters, and witnesses' stories and events and crash retrieval incidences or trace cases or whatever. And so it's just so that I understood what people were talking about, right? So you have to go through the literature first and put the effort into reading and just not go off half-cocked. And so I'm still in this mode here in the survival work and still trying to read in spare time and trying to network with people, that commune with other folks. And like yourself, George, you're an amazing journalist in what you know and all that you've made it your job to get into and investigate. And so I'm kind of doing that too, because I look at myself as a researcher and maybe a facilitator, if I can help in any way to try to help people find answers, and all of us kind of collaborating together.
Well, it's a steep learning curve in both of those topics. You got to read a lot to get your head around the basics.
Yeah, and in some ways it almost feels like it's not intended for you to know in some ways, right? You have these walls, these glass walls that all of a sudden in both of these topics, and it makes it very, very tough to try and get further. You get teased by so many kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
And
Get
our
a
work
little
in both fields.
1989, Bob Lazar pops onto the scene, and you wanted to meet him. You did meet him.
Yeah.
We hung out. We would go out and just BS for hours. We'd go up to Rachel, go out in the desert.
Right.
A lot has been written about you and Bob, your relationship. You went into business for a while. How you've sort of you find him to be a fraud. He made it all up. You parted ways. It was acrimonious. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I never viewed Bob as being a fraud, as to Area 51 and all of that. I spent a certain amount of time in conversations with him. We put a little bitty business together and tried to do something for about 4 months in that business. And so I had opportunities to test him, like you would, like anybody would, and see if he repeated the same thing and stuck to his stories and or what kinds of things could I find that were not legitimate. And I didn't find much. I wouldn't say it was zero, but I didn't find much that I could say, oh no, this guy is absolutely off, in what he's telling me is the truth. And so I wouldn't say that he had not experienced a lot of the things he claims that he has.
You think he did?
I think the odds, I would look at it in terms of odds. This is Las Vegas, right? So I would say the odds are Bob Lazar has, for the most part on everything he has said, it has been telling the truth. Those are the odds. And I would say if you're betting against that, you're betting against substantial odds, and that the chances are you're going to lose. If you think that he's been lying, the chances are you're going to lose.
There's also the allegation about Element 115. Do you think Element 115 existed and that he had a piece of it at one point? And did he try to fool you with the 115 and the aerogel?
I discovered that aerogel was not what it purported. I guess what he was saying it was, and it was accidentally. I accidentally came across the fact that this beautiful, smoky, very lightweight kind of crystal
Weird, yeah.
was aerogel, totally by accident. I happened to be going through a magazine, and I thought, oh my God, I saw a picture of this material in the magazine, and I pursued it and found out it was alcohol-based, it was aerogel, it was invented in the 1930s, and it could be used as an insulative kind of material. It was 5 times the weight of air, and it was beautiful. It looked like a kind of a gem. Gee, you'd want to put it on a woman's finger because it looked so beautiful as a big ring. That was the only thing that I really felt that of a physical piece of something. So I have no opinion about the element 115. I think Bob was intriguing because he knew so much. He's a smart guy. He's no dummy. He's a smart man. He's a smart guy, and very creative. And so, again, I say that the preponderance of evidence to me is in his favor. That he's by and large legitimate.
He had told me that aerogel arrived with the 115. It was like packing material, and he didn't know what it was. But later, I guess he developed a story that he told you about what he thought it was. But he didn't decide to say it was 115.
Well, it doesn't mean that he would necessarily know what the original custody of the material was, right? Just because it's associated with something doesn't mean that this bottle of water, which stands next to something else peculiar, they're both connected. So it means he may have leapt to that assumption that the aerogel, because it was in association physically nearby or whatever with the 115, was somehow connected, and he just didn't know what it was.
That's
So
what he told
I
me.
would give him the benefit of the doubt on that, and because I don't have anything else that is more concrete, I'd rather not say, well, somebody, that he knew differently.
One of the tests you did was to see if he was motivated by money, and what you've told me is that you didn't think he was.
I tempted him. In different ways. I can remember in a conversation that we had, and he probably isn't even aware that I did that. But I offered him money. I forget the circumstances now, but it didn't tempt him at all. And so I thought, well, either he's awful goddamn peculiar, or there's something legitimate going on here.
You went into business to build a certain device. He set him up in a small lab to see how he did, and then you split. After a while, you split up.
Yeah.
A lot of stories told about that. But
Yeah.
what's the bottom line for you?
I had a gal working for me that would check up on him, and I was out of town at the time, and she says, and so I said, okay, what's going on in the lab? And she said, well, I'm really sorry to tell you, it's being used as a little warehouse for furniture, And I thought, oh, geez, okay, I see the signs now. Okay, that's the end of it.
That he just wasn't doing what he said he would do.
Correct. So
Well, that sounds very Bob-like, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was a storehouse, warehouse for him, because he had this furniture and no place to put it, I guess. Yeah, that was all. It was, what was it, Zeta Reticuli
2 or something.
2, yeah. Zeta Reticuli 1 is a binary star system that's 38 light years away. So
that experience, it seems like the timeline after that, you started investing money in researchers, supporting them to do work. Bud Hopkins, Linda Howe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I sought out the best of the best, and they were part of the best researchers. And again, you can't, you don't want to be a one-man band. You want to embrace other people to try to accomplish more. And we all have to do that in trying to grow in whatever we're trying to do. Going alone is it's a much slower path, right? So Bud was a great guy. I liked Bud. He was an artist, a really good artist and a terrific self-made researcher, incredible, and an author. You know, he was a clever man.
So was it results oriented, or you just wanted to support projects, or how did it work? And John Mack, I think, was one of the people you helped, right?
Yeah, a lot of the research was topic specific, and Linda Howe had her category of analyzing cattle mutilation tissues and hemoglobin and to see if high heat was used, possibly laser in causing incisions and other kinds of things. And so she pioneered all of that kind of work. And then Bud, of course, in doing abduction research, and so we were involved in one time we in a crash retrieval incident, and to our satisfaction, we verified that did occur, and Stanton Freeman, another crash retrieval incident, we verified that occurred, and both of these were in New Mexico, and the first one wasn't the Roswell incident. This other one occurred in the 60s. So John Mack, he was looking at it from a different clinical kind of standpoint on abductees. I sponsored a number of free lectures where he and other folks into this field, researchers, would engage mental health professionals and psychologists, psychiatrists, and other therapists, and challenge the audience. We had maybe 100 people each time in major cities, and challenge them to come up with an explanation as to why these people were claiming making these ridiculous claims about being involved in an abduction, an alien abduction. What kind of psychosis is responsible for that? You know, what would it be? Especially if there are multiple people involved in the abduction as witnesses. You got a collective psychosis now, you know? And so by the end of the evenings, they would run completely out of gas, the audience would, and couldn't, because everything had been answered, and to their satisfaction. It wasn't that they'd been told to shut up or anything, it's that they ran out of gas. They had no more questions to ask because they couldn't think of anything else as a cause for these
Might
things.
explain part of it, but
Yeah.
not the totality of it.
Yeah, John was a great guy. He was so unfortunate, his passing, but he was a great guy. And of course, Harvard was trying to get rid of him.
Yeah.
You know, trying to get rid of him, and bless his heart, he fought back and won.
The creation of NIDS. I remember you had offered $1 million to these 3 UFO organizations. Hey, I just want you guys to get along and do some actual research. And they couldn't do it, right?
Yeah. Now, okay, because there was our government program.
That's later.
That was later. Okay, so what you're talking about, I did personally.
Yeah, I think it was pre-NIDS. I think it was right leading up before NIDS.
Yeah.
You got kind of disgusted with the UFO organization.
Well, there was always territoriality with the UFO research group, as is common with any group populated by humans. That, you know, you're protecting your turf. You're trying to protect your reputation. You don't want to be ostracized. You don't want to be made a fool of. You don't want to lose grants. You don't want to lose your peers, the respect of your peers. So all these pressures go on all the time, right this second, right now, this minute, all across this country. And it handcuffs a lot of people in being able to have the freedom to explore their curiosity. And so the UFO groups were all different. They had their turf, and they had their kind of, whether it was CUFOS, FUFO, or MUFON, right? Is that, those are the ones?
That's the ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't ask me about the acronyms on these things. Anyway, it's what they stand for. But they all had their territory, and MUFON was the biggest, and still is. But working them together was like herding cats. It was really tough to get them, because sharing information is part of the value of what you possess, right? And having information might have been acquired through a lot of difficulty, and so and that's not something you just want to freely pass around the table if you've gone to an awful lot of trouble to acquire the information,
Right.
or even some objects or whatever it might be, right? So
So that failed. Is that an impetus to create NIDS? So you decided to create your own organization?
it could have been. I don't remember. It could have been. My philosophy is it's just a lot better to try to acquire collaboration and try to get everybody rowing in unison down, and maybe down this path and that path. It doesn't mean that you have to have just one path that you're all are rowing down. And why not have sympathy for another path as well? If the efficacy is there, go for it. Have more than just one damn path, so sometimes it doesn't work.
NIDS is created, National Institute for Discovery Science. You put together this world-class science advisory board, and it is, people remember it as a UFO investigatory
Right.
organization, but it really
Right.
was both of the subjects.
Yeah, we had two pillars of that organization, and we tackled in our infinite wisdom, both the survival of consciousness and the UFO topic, because we didn't know any better. And we bit off a lot more than we could chew, and we finally came to a point. We had a very sizable board, a group of folks, science advisory members, and you say, they were world class. They really were, and from all different kinds of backgrounds. I was very proud of who all these people were and are.
Hal Puthoff, Kit Green, Jacques Vallée, two astronauts, Edgar Mitchell, and then on the consciousness side, there were some big names there as well. Ian Stevenson,
Bruce Grayson, Emily Cook, Jessica Utz were there, and Ian was a great guy, great researcher, and he was world famous, and rightfully so. And they were into the survival topic. So there came a time when we began to realize that it seemed to be easier. There were more opportunities on the ET UFO subject to do research on. And some were quite enticing and exciting. But there were so many more multiple kinds of categories. The survival presented, at that time, more of a difficult challenge.
And the UFO side sort of took over, and the consciousness side kind of went away.
It did. It did.
Part of the UFO research that you did includes the Skinwalker Ranch, this ranch, the Bigelow Ranch.
Yeah.
1996, you hear bits and pieces about this strange place, a lot of weird activity, UFO activity. So you go there, you buy it.
Yeah.
What was your intention with the ranch?
Well, first I spent quite a bit of time talking to Terry Sherman. He and his wife and two children lived there. He was the owner, and they operated the ranch, and they raised cattle there, and they had a phenomenal diversity of encounters. And I believe that this guy was a squared away. He was a straight shooter. He wasn't throwing baloney at me, and these encounters were real. And so he was in an exhausted situation. His wife wound up getting fired from the bank because it leaked out that these things they were preoccupied as a family and discussing these kinds of things once in a while with select people, thinking they could trust somebody, and these things were kind of happening, and it was like, gee, these people are so weird, you better not get anywhere near them. And it cost her her job at the bank for no reason other than this. And so Terry and I made a deal, and providing he would stay on because I needed somebody there. In addition, he had, he had literally backyard knowledge of things, and so he stayed on for quite a while.
Whatever the intelligence is there, it's hard to categorize, right? I mean, you go in, I mean, you're initially attracted because you hear stories about flying saucers, then
Yeah.
you realize it's a lot broader
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah.
It's hard to figure out what it is, though, because it was so elusive. I know even now, after all the attention that's been given to it, people have a hard time buying the idea that something intelligent would show you glimpses and not let you ever get your hands around it.
Right. I did not know with whom we were communicating. And there are two choices, basically, because of all the circumstances surrounding the different kinds of communications. So there weren't parochial answers. It was either a discarnate entities, non-human entities, or ETs. Well, we could just about eliminate everything else because it would be impossible. I mean, you can't be 500 miles away and make requests that things show up on camera, and you have witnesses that are taking the pictures on the camera, and and you ask them, what is it that you're seeing in that camera? And they have no idea what to say because it's not something you've had any conversation with them about, and they're just describing you what it is, and it's exactly what you requested. And you do it again, and you do it again. And it says, there are different kinds of things that are showing up is what you requested, and they're telling you this over the telephone. We set up, we had spontaneous photos in different places. And things would happen. There's no reason for photons to travel 5 feet and stop, 5 or 6 feet. And everything is blacked out behind that because of, well, we don't know, but that's as far as the photons would travel. Or you're randomly taking pictures and you're capturing a nightstand right alongside the bed, and in that photo, something is lifting off. And it's changing hue and tone and shades of color. It looks very mechanical, but it's hard to tell. There appears to be not only the movement, it's in an arc, but it is it's a little blurry, like there's movement going on, but of course it is moving, but maybe there's something else happening too. And no, it wasn't a bird or a butterfly that was sitting there at that. It wasn't some kind of object like that, because of the circumstances. Or you're taking pictures of somebody, you take pictures of rods flying past, different color kinds of something tubular going by. You're taking pictures of where there's so many orbs around someone who is sick, legitimately ill, and now they start feeling better, and the camera is catching all this in multiple shots, and it's a cloud. You can't count them. There's thousands, and it's in a cloud formation, and only on the periphery are you able to start to see some individual ones. It's all lit up. But your other photos before all that is darker than the aura outside. This is nighttime. And so there was a blackness that blocked out any kind of ambient light coming from the moon or some other, who knows what at that place, there weren't any other kinds of normal lights, so it had to have been probably moonlight. But there was a blackness like around you. There would be an outline, a kind of a dark silhouette behind you that's blocking out the fact that you can see a tree trunk over here, but you can't see something else right next to you, in between. So, and then the orbs all start coming in. So we had multiple different kinds of things. You know, we had the case where a camera's in view of another camera, and that other camera is all disconnected. You know, the cable runs up 30 feet to the telephone pole, and every 4 feet on center there is duct tape binding the harnessing of the cable together, and then the cable goes through a steel box, and there's knots tied inside, so you can't just pull it back out of that box. And everything's all taken apart in full view of the other camera.
And then but when you look at the footage, there's nothing there.
There's nothing there. We couldn't see anything, you know.
Was that a message from the phenomenon of the intelligence that we're tired of you hunting us?
It's all about messaging. So it's all about games and gaming and messaging. In our case, we didn't have anybody hurt. There was an episode with the ranch manager after Terry. I hired some other folks, some wonderful people, and he had a horse accident, but we don't know enough to make any suppositions or claims or anything, speculation about that. But we never had anybody hurt on property. There was hurt, and because of these events. So what it was all about, it was games. There was instructions through participating in games that we would set up. And we would verify the controls on those games could not have been manipulated by a human or person in the meantime.
And it worked, though. I mean, something moved these things around.
Oh, absolutely. And we took pictures, of course, before and after, and nobody else was able to do that, was around to do that, right? And the reestablishing of the game was better than we had set it up. There was more information being given by the way it was reconstituted than the way that we had established the game to begin with. Right? It's all about messaging. It was all about instructional kinds of things.
Were you on the verge of communicating, you think, a couple times? I mean, there was back and forth, but you didn't really ever establish who you're communicating with.
It finally got to where from me personally, it was, I don't know how to say that, because it sounds stupid. But I've said a lot of stupid things, so I don't mind. I got a little tired or bored because I wasn't making any progress of understanding the who. And all I could do, I could keep on asking for orbs and taking pictures and wherever I happened to be, not just at the ranch or other things. And a lot of people do that kind of thing, but also asking things to manifest on photos and making those requests. And I would be in Las Vegas, and they'd be at the ranch, and we'd be doing that back and forth and thing. But you begin to say, okay, we don't know, as I said, with whom we were communicating, and this could go on and on and on. Now, I've had to learn to acquire some patience. I'm not a super patient guy, but I'm trying to do my best and work on that, and I'm better than I was. But I probably needed to have a lot more patience than what I did have, and I probably got off on some other track, distracted by something else, and just decided, well, we were repeating a lot of things that was going on, and we weren't having craft manifest on the ranch. That was the full-blown broad daylight kind of thing that happened with Terry. Now, we had things happen on the ranch that two of our folks saw something in a high canopy of trees, very tall trees, and in the upper canopy blocked out stars and limbs, and something was commingled up there, and then it disappeared, it moved on.
The tunnel?
Well, and the tunnel was another one where somebody with night vision goggles could see it and the other person could not see it. and you'd switch them back, and it was true that you had to have those goggles. If you weren't using those, you couldn't see. That light had turned into a structure that looked like a pipe, and something crawled out of the pipe and walked away.
These things were real. I mean, they really did happen. Your employees, your scientists saw them. There were physical, very physical manifestations, the calf mutilation, other cattle and animals that were destroyed or carved up. There were the destruction of the camera, the ice circle. I mean, a lot of things that were physical.
Yeah.
But in general, this was elusive. It would give you a glimpse, tease you a little bit, and then almost scoff and laugh.
Well, it gets frustrating, yeah, because you have so many of these things happen, and where is it leading? What are you supposed to make of it? You know, after a while, it's not that it gets to be just frustrating that these things would happen, and maybe you can cause them to happen again. Okay. But you want to try to get to what is the point here. Tell us more. Talk to us. Communicate something in a way that we can understand that now we need to shift to do, rather than just guessing and doing all that. We wanted more. We wanted to be able to shift and change the communication kinds of format.
But it would.
Again, we might have been just too impatient and maybe not creative enough in our thinking. I also, I got very disturbed toward the end about something that happened to some of the government people. And I realized, holy crap.
Hitchhikers.
Well, yeah. That, so hitchhikers being that you take things home with you. Everybody took things home with them. I took things to my house. Things happened to my wife and to me, and different things. So everybody took things home. We all, we did, but we didn't know that, gee, it was like going to be kind of permanent. We didn't know that, that it's going to stay with you for for years and years or the rest of your life, who knows. But the ones that bothered me a lot were where anybody got hurt or really disturbed. And not that it happened on the ranch. It was when they left the ranch, as you say, hitchhikers, and these were government people, and affected them.
Very dramatic ways, though.
Very dramatic ways. Very dramatic ways. And there's a cousin to that we're facing, but it's abated at least for now, and this other survival topic, right? Very dramatic kind of things that we wanted to have reduced or stopped. So, but going back to the government people, the buyer came along at the right time. I had decided I wanted to
take this off your plate.
Yeah, take it off my plate, tone it down, and if necessary, just lock it up and forget about it. And next thing I know, the buyer comes along, and the rest is history.
So on the ranch, you had so many different kinds of phenomena. You had UFOs, you had cattle mutilations, you had trickster activity, the bulls in the trailer, that kind of thing. You had creatures of different kinds. Things that would take over people's minds, the tunnel of light. Was it all the same? Bigfoot, was it all the same phenomena in different forms, or was it like a crossroads for a bunch of different things?
You got me. I don't know. We had fabulous conversations with deputy sheriffs that had unbelievable encounters, that they saw things. Just here, they're county officials and city officials and some really great people that, like Frank Salisbury as a researcher did such a great job, and his book is a terrific book. So many things happen that in the Uinta Basin in general, And then specifically on certain ranches, and even more specifically on the Skinwalker Ranch. But all kinds of events and activities happened in broad daylight or at nighttime at all kinds of places throughout that whole area. And the police were very aware of these things, and they had terrific encounters of their own. And we were told a lot of these stories. We interviewed a lot of people, you know, in the area as researchers, so that we had a good idea of what other ranchers were encountering. Was it just us? No, it wasn't just us. It wasn't just this 480 acres on the Skinwalker Ranch. It was peripheral to that ranch as well. Things were happening all over the place. I mean, if you thought that it was the events on the Skinwalker Ranch were wild ass events, oh no, just go to the next ranch right next door and listen to their stories. And you want to hear some really bizarre ones, I'm thinking of them right now, you know, to our neighbors there. I think it was the...
Garcia?
Yeah, I wasn't going to say the
Okay,
name, but
well,
anyway, yeah, okay, so it's out. But anyway, yeah, them. I mean, they had some incredible kinds of stuff happen. And kinds of...
Scary, spooky.
Well, yeah, because it's not like your everyday drive on the freeway, you know, yeah, the menu never seemed to stop. And it was kind of funny in that the same exact event usually did not ever happen. You know, that was a rarity, you know, that you could have the same kind of thing repeat itself, so that you could set up methods to be able to equate and evaluate, so you could repeat it, right? That's what you want to do in a laboratory, is have repetition, right? And be able to control and have something else that's a control sample and something else here that isn't. And
Not there. No.
no, it made it very...
Ever figure out why there? I mean, does it have something to do with the proximity to the Native Americans who were kind of spooked about the place?
Yeah, but the American Indians have been all over this country, and strange things have happened all over the place. But you can't say necessarily that you can ascribe this to people that were indigenous to the area historically, or is it geology, or because of fossils there? Nobody knows.
You looked at all that stuff.
It's anybody's guess is as good as anybody else's guess, is what it boils down to. By the way, I'm 1/32nd Cherokee, so
well, that's probably
for what it's worth.
Before we leave this, though, the incidents that happened to you, to your wife, to Colum, to me, you bring it home. How does everybody handle that? I mean, is it spooky at the time, and do you draw the connection that it's ranch related?
Yes and no. If the events hadn't happened very often prior to the ranch, then it's not ranch connected. But they did happen. And they did, where we lived with my wife and I. We had a poltergeist event one time that was really fun and very different, and that was before I ever acquired the ranch. My wife was a very strong, and probably still is in spirit, person. And so she took them in stride. She had a full manifestation of a apparition, a human form apparition in the bedroom, and looking at her. And this was a holy cow. And she happened to tell me, kind of like, oh, well, this is while you were gone, this is what happened here, a manifestation of this. I've heard this kind of thing many times through other people, and recently, and she felt the bed depress, as there was a curiosity going on, because of the facial features were distinctive enough to be able as though, who are you and what are you doing here, coming from the manifestation from the apparition, looking at her, all right? And torso up was kind of what was manifested, and being able to see and feel the mattress being depressed as it's looking at you, wondering, who are you? That kind of look on the face. what are you doing here? You know, when usually you think it would be the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Who the hell are you?
Was she freaked out?
No, she wasn't. She would have there was a bar of light. So this was not normal in the survival research, but maybe in the ET that was between her pillows. A bar of light. Wasn't coming in from shutters or blinds or anything from the room or any kind of other light source. You could cover, put the pillows down, and the bar would not be reflected on the surface of the object above it, on the second pillow. It only happened when you did this. And she did that and said, oh well. And then I said, well, what did you do? Well, I went to sleep. Went to sleep. So.
A lot of